The 1998 NBA Eastern Conference Finals between the Chicago Bulls and the Indiana Pacers was one of the most intense and memorable matchups in NBA history. The two teams were evenly matched in terms of talent, and their styles of play clashed in a way that made for an unforgettable series. The Bulls were led by Michael Jordan and had won 5 championships in the previous 7 years, while the Pacers were a gritty team led by Reggie Miller and featuring a dominant frontcourt. In this Hoopsha Story 26 video, we will relive the excitement of this unforgettable series, from the opening tip-off to the final buzzer. Get ready to experience the thrills and drama of one of the greatest rivalries in NBA history. The NBA has had its fair share of stars. The most popular stars usually seem to be shooting guards. Two of the biggest in the 1990s were Michael Jordan and Reggie Miller. This was one of the biggest reasons why the Chicago Bulls and Indiana Pacers became rivals, because of the Jordan and Miller shooting guard duel. Also, Indiana and Chicago are close to each other, so this made the rivalry more intense. By the time the 1987-1988 NBA season arrived, Michael Jordan was already a household name. MJ already set the playoff scoring record of 63 points, and he averaged an incredible 37.1 points per game in the 1986-1987 season. Jordan took what stars Magic Johnson and Larry Bird did in saving the league with their rivalry and raised the game to a global level, nearly single-handedly. To this day, there has never been an NBA star that has shined brighter than Michael Jordan. Reggie Miller, on the other hand, was a rookie in 1987, and he wasn't well received by Pacers fans. The fans in Indiana wanted Steve Alford, the star player of the Indiana Hoosiers, who led the Hoosiers to win the national championship in 1987. Yes, Indiana loves the game of basketball, and they love their own. Miller was not a Hoosier. He was a brash-talking kid from California, and fans believed Miller was going to be a bust. So, Jordan and Miller certainly had different beginnings to their careers in the NBA. They also looked very different. Michael Jordan was known for his aggressive, attacking style of play. He was a physical player who could drive to the hoop, make quick cuts, and score points from virtually any position on the court. Jordan was also a fierce competitor who never gave up, even when facing seemingly impossible odds. His "never say die" attitude and relentless work ethic helped him become one of the greatest basketball players of all time. In contrast, Reggie Miller was more of a finesse player, relying on his agility and accuracy to score points. He was known for his three-point shooting ability, and he was deadly from beyond the arc. Miller was also a clever player, using his intelligence to outmaneuver opponents and get into scoring positions. While he may not have been as physically imposing as Jordan, Miller was a cunning player who knew how to win games. Their playing styles may have been different, but both Jordan and Miller shared a deep passion for the game. They were both driven to succeed and would do whatever it took to come out on top. Their rivalry was one of the greatest in basketball history, and it helped elevate both players to legendary status. This is what happened to Miller as the years passed by. Pacers fans realized Miller was not only the right choice for their team, but he'd become the franchise's legendary player, whose impact has still not been matched by an Indiana Pacers player to this day. Miller's status to becoming legendary would truly begin when Jordan retired to play baseball during the 1993-1994 season. Miller saw this as his chance to become the league's best shooting guard, and he took full advantage of that. But before all that would happen, Miller would play Jordan for the first time during the preseason of 1987, and this set up what would eventually be the rivalry fans adored during the 1990s. Miller was known for his trash talking, and he made the mistake once trash talking to Jordan during this preseason game in 1987. Miller spoke about this incident once in an interview on Jimmy Kimmel Live. "My rookie year we were playing the Chicago Bulls, and this is Michael Jordan's 3rd or 4th year in," Miller explained, "and we were playing an exhibition game. Most veterans do not like to play in exhibition games, they want to get to the real thing. I'm a wide-eyed, energetic rookie and Michael's going through the motions. And Chuck Person, who's on my team, who is a trash talker as well, is like, can you believe Michael Jordan, the guy everyone's talking about, who's supposed to be able to walk on water? You're out here killing him, Reg. You should be talking to him. And I was like, you know what, you're right. Michael, who do you think you are? The great Michael Jordan. That's right, there's a new kid in town. He kind of looks at me and starts shaking his head. So at half I have 10, and he has 4 points. End of the game, the second half, he ended up with 44 and I ended up with 12. So he outscored me 40-2. And as he's walking off, he's like, be sure, and be careful, you never talk to Black Jesus like that. This incident with Miller put a bad taste in Jordan's mouth that would carry over throughout his career, hitting its plateau in 1993. During a regular season game this time, the Bulls were in Indiana playing the Pacers. Early in the first quarter, after tipping in a shot, Miller ran out of bounds where Jordan stood, and he pushed Jordan hard. Jordan did not like it, and he reacted by slamming into Miller and wrapping himself around Miller's body. There, the two started scratching, and punches were thrown before teammates broke it up. The craziest thing about the Jordan and Miller fight was the fact Miller was thrown out of the game, and Jordan wasn't. This goes to show you the power of Michael Jordan during his prime in the 1990s. Jordan would be suspended for the next game, but for this game against the Pacers, Jordan would play and play well. He scored 40 as the Bulls won 115-104. Michael Jordan retired after winning his third championship in 1993, and it gave way for Reggie Miller to step into the role of the best shooting guard in the league. Miller would take full advantage of Jordan's absence in the first full year without MJ in the league. In the 1994 playoffs, the Indiana Pacers met up with the team that was supposed to take over as the best in the East, the New York Knicks. Nobody in the world, outside of Indiana, of course, gave the Pacers a shot at winning the series. After the first 4 games, New York fans were biting their nails just a bit. The series was tied 2-2, with each team winning on their home courts. New York was expected to protect its home court once again, and after the first 3 quarters, it appeared they would. The Knicks took a 70-58 lead into the fourth quarter, and by watching the game, you figured the Knicks, who had all the momentum, would pull away with the easy win. Back to Reggie Miller. This was his time to shine. No Michael Jordan, as we mentioned, and yet, he was caving to the pressure. Miller only scored 14 points through the first 3 quarters and often looked out of the Pacers' offense. Then, in the fourth quarter, Miller started barking at the legendary filmmaker and self-proclaimed #1 New York Knicks fan, Spike Lee. The back-and-forth banter between Miller and Lee led to Miller giving basketball fans one of the greatest fourth-quarter performances fans have ever seen in an NBA playoff game. Miller scored 25 fourth-quarter points while putting on an incredible shooting display. Miller shot 7-9 from the field in the fourth and 5-5 from 3. Miller's 5 made three-pointers tied a record for made threes in a quarter at the time. The Pacers would win Game 5 9-3, 8-6 to take a 3-2 series lead. Unfortunately for Miller and the Pacers, the Knicks would storm back to win the series in 7 games. Still, you couldn't take away the fact Reggie Miller instantly became the best shooting guard in the NBA and the league's next star. This dominant guard stature for Miller would be short-lived, as Michael Jordan sent the now famous fax that said, "I'm back," on March 18, 1995. Jordan was back in the league after missing nearly 2 years, and it was fitting that his first game back would be played against Miller and the Pacers. The question that was on everyone's mind when Jordan announced he was making a comeback to the league was, can he dominate the way he did before retiring? At first, some people doubted that Jordan could return to that level, especially after he showed his rust from being retired against Miller's Pacers. Jordan scored 19 points on 7-28 shooting. Miller, on the other hand, had a good game, scoring 28 on 8-18 shooting and 4-12 from three-point distance. The Pacers won the game in overtime by a score of 103-96, but a side story of the game ended up being the collision between Jordan and Miller in the fourth quarter. The game was tied at 92-92, and with 3 seconds left, Miller popped off a screen to take the game's final shot. Jordan fought through the screen, and as he sprung toward Miller, the Pacers sharpshooter pump faked and made a move to the basket. As Miller made his move, Jordan stuck his leg out, which collided with Miller's leg, and the two ended up on the floor in obvious pain. Miller would only return for one possession in overtime, as Jordan finished the game. Jordan's first game back looked like a potential preview of an Eastern Conference Finals matchup in the 1995 playoffs. After the Pacers defeated the Bulls on March 19, 1995, Indiana held the best record in the Central Division at 40-24. After the loss, Chicago sat with a 34-32 record, which was 4th in the Central Division and 6th in the East. Even though the Bulls' record wasn't the best, they entered the game against the Pacers as one of the hottest teams in the league. The Bulls won 3 straight games and 8 out of their last 10 games. So, when you factor in Michael Jordan returning to the lineup, Chicago should easily reach the conference finals. This, of course, would not happen as the Bulls would suffer a 4-2 defeat to the powerhouse Orlando Magic in the semifinals. The Pacers would reach the Eastern Conference Finals, but they'd suffer the same fate as the Bulls, losing to the Magic, but Indiana took Orlando to 7 games. Fans were robbed of seeing the league's 2 biggest shooting guards face off in the playoffs while Anthony Penny Hardaway was making a case for himself as the best shooting guard in the league. Jordan would quickly make everyone forget about Miller or Hardaway as he returned in the 1995-1996 season as not just the best shooting guard in the NBA but the best player in the league. Jordan led the Bulls to a then-record 72 wins and the NBA championship in the 1995-1996 season. The following season Jordan led the Bulls to another title after leading the Bulls to 69 wins. The 1997-1998 season, known as The Last Dance, was a little different from the previous 2. Scottie Pippen missed the first 35 games, and the Bulls looked, at times, like what they were, a tired team. While Jordan was leading the Bulls to back-to-back titles, Miller and the Pacers were struggling to remain as one of the top teams in the East. The year Chicago won 72 games, Indiana finished the season with a 52-30 record, which was 3rd best in the East. The Pacers' season would take a turn for the worst in the 1995-1996 season when Miller suffered a fractured eye socket in a game against the Detroit Pistons on April 13, 1996. Miller returned for one game in the playoffs, which was Game 5 against the Atlanta Hawks in the first round. Miller would play well, scoring 29 points, but the Pacers fell 89-87, losing the series. The 1996-1997 season ended up being a throwaway season for Indiana, as they dealt with injuries and trades that didn't make sense. The Pacers missed the playoffs in the 1996-1997 season, but things would turn around in the 1997-1998 season when Indiana hired the legendary Boston Celtics star, Larry Bird, as their new head coach. The Pacers looked better than they ever looked before, winning 58 games and finishing 2nd in the East, behind the Bulls, who won 62 games. This time, the Bulls and the Pacers would both reach the Eastern Conference Finals, setting up the first playoff meeting between Jordan and Miller. Finally, these 2 stars were going to battle to prove who was the best shooting guard in the league, and it would turn into one of the greatest playoff series in NBA history. But before we dive into their epic playoff series, let's take a closer look at Jordan versus Miller and their all-time record against each other. In their careers, the 2 stars played against each other in 49 regular season games. Jordan completely dominated Miller in their head-to-head matchups during the regular season. Jordan holds a 32-17 record against Miller in the regular season, and Jordan averaged 29.5 points per game, while Miller averaged 19.1 points per game. Jordan averaged 6.1 rebounds, 5.4 assists, 2.6 steals, and 0.9 blocks per game, which were all higher than Miller's averages, which were 3.2 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 0.9 steals, and 0.3 blocks per game. Miller is one of the best shooters the game has ever seen, especially from three-point range, and he did, in fact, outshoot Jordan with 35.8% from three, while Jordan wasn't far off shooting 32.2% from downtown. Jordan shot 47.6% overall from the field, while Miller shot 46.7% in their career head-to-head matchups. So, Jordan clearly had the edge in team wins and in individual performance. Would Jordan get the better of Miller in their first playoff matchup? Game 1 of the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals began in Chicago, and the Bulls, who were looking to three-peat, knew it wasn't going to be easy. This includes Jordan, who had some interesting things to say about Miller in an interview that was released on April 6, 1998, in an issue of ESPN the magazine. "I don't really dislike anybody in the league, but playing Reggie Miller drives me nuts," Jordan said. "It's like chicken fighting with a woman. His game is all this flopping type thing. He weighs only 185 pounds, so you have to be careful, don't touch him, or it's a foul. On offense, I use all my 215 pounds and just move him out. But he has his hands on you all the time, like a woman holding your waist. I just want to beat his hands off because it's illegal. It irritates me." As Game 1 started, the Pacers jumped out the gates looking like the hungrier team, and Miller looked like the sharper shooting guard. Miller scored 7 points on an efficient 3-5 shooting while Jordan scored 6, but he shot only 1-7. The Pacers held a 22-16 lead after one quarter. The Bulls would respond better as a team in the second quarter, outscoring the Pacers by 3. The Pacers held on to a 40-37 halftime lead. Miller had another good quarter in the third, as he scored 7 more while shooting 2-5 from the field and 2-4 from downtown. The problem was that Miller didn't get as much help in the third, and Jordan finally woke up. Jordan scored 10 in the third quarter while finding his rhythm, shooting 5-8 from the field. The fourth quarter belonged to Jordan and Jordan only, as he scored 15 while Miller was held to 2. The most important outcome was the Bulls' 85-79 Game 1 victory. The NBA awarded Michael Jordan with the MVP trophy before the start of Game 2. This was an obvious sign of whose game it was going to be. It became Jordan's game as he scored 17 in the first half, yet, the Pacers held a 52-45 halftime lead. The remainder of the Bulls players struggled, especially Scottie Pippen, who shot only 3-11 in the first half. Miller struggled in the first half with 3 points on 1-6 shooting, but his teammates stepped up. This includes Chris Mullin with 11 and Antonio Davis with 10 points. On this night, the MVP wouldn't be denied. Jordan would continue his assault on the Pacers, scoring 24 more points in the second half, finishing with 41. The defending champion Chicago Bulls successfully defended their home court with a 104-98 victory. The only question that remained was, will Chicago's great play transfer over on the road, in Indiana? The Indiana Pacers had some of the loudest fans in the NBA during the 1990s, and these fans were ready to cheer their Pacers on in Game 3. The Bulls and Pacers traded blows throughout the first half. Jordan scored 15, while his rival, Miller, scored 13. In the third quarter, Pacers fans got the scare of their lives. With about 6 minutes left in the third, Miller injured his ankle and he was limping badly. If Miller can't play, the Pacers wouldn't have a shot at beating the Bulls, right? That's probably correct, but we wouldn't find that out as Miller did continue to play, and he came up big in the fourth quarter. As the Bulls were trying to pull away from the Pacers, Miller, despite a severely sprained ankle, took over the game. Miller scored 13 of his 28 points in the final 4.5 minutes, helping the Pacers secure the 107-105 victory. The Pacers were so close to going down 3-0 in the series, a deficit that has never been overcome by any team in league history. Thanks to the heroics of the injured Reggie Miller, the Pacers were still alive, but if they wanted to make this a real series, they'd have to defend home court again in Game 4. Miller's ankle tightened up in the 2 days since Game 3, and you could tell he wasn't right. Jordan, on the other hand, also didn't look like his normal self early on, until Rick Schmitz of the Pacers inadvertently smacked him in the face, making him bleed above his eye in the second quarter. Jordan left the game briefly with 5:01 remaining in the first quarter. He'd go in the back and get steri strips over his right eye. Jordan returned to the game at the end of the first quarter, and everyone in the building knew Jordan was about to take over. There's been a history of Jordan being hurt and responding with vengeance, and this would happen in the second quarter. Jordan would have a stretch, hitting 5 shots in a row en route to 13 second quarter points, helping the Bulls build a 54-48 halftime lead. The big story in Game 4 came at the end of the game. It has gone down as one of the greatest shots in NBA playoff history. The Pacers turned the ball over and fouled Scottie Pippen with 4.7 seconds remaining in the game. After the foul, Reggie Miller and Ron Harper got into a shoving match at the Chicago bench. The players had to be separated, and after the smoke cleared, Pippen found himself at the free throw line. This would end up being a disaster as Pippen missed both free throws and the ball would be knocked out of bounds, in possession of the Pacers. The game clock showed 2.9 seconds remaining, and that's all Miller and the Pacers needed in this game. Miller found himself wide open after he bulldozed through Jordan's chest, and he swished the three-point shot. The entire crowd roared with excitement. Miller was dancing around on his injured ankle and Pacers coach Larry Bird stood watching with a stoic expression. Bird wasn't excited because he knew the Bulls had one last shot, with 0.7 seconds remaining. Bird understood that Michael Jordan played for the Chicago Bulls, and with Jordan, you're never out of a game. Jordan would get a good look for 3, after double clutching, and the ball would go halfway down the rim before spinning out, giving the Pacers the 96-94 victory. After 4 games, the series saw the home team win each game. This would remain the same in Game 5. The first 4 games of the series were also all close, but Game 5 would be the only blowout of the series, as the Bulls jumped all over the Pacers from the opening tip. The Bulls won Game 5 106-87 behind Jordan's 29 points and Pippen's 20. Miller scored 14 on 5-10 shooting, but if the Pacers wanted a chance to win the series, Miller was going to need to get some help. Reggie Miller would get help in Game 6, which was a good thing since he scored only 8 points on 2-13 shooting and 1-7 from 3. Rick Schmitz, on the other hand, had his breakout game of the series. He shot 11-12 from the field en route to scoring 25 points. But Schmitz wasn't the only Pacers player to step up. Dale Davis had 19 on 7-9 shooting and Mark Jackson added 13. For the Bulls, Jordan was his normal self, scoring 35 on 12-23 shooting, and Pippen added 19 points. However, the Bulls wouldn't get enough help. There was one remaining Pacers player who stepped up when it was needed the most. This was backup point guard Travis Best. Best only scored 6 points, but his runner over Steve Kerr with 33.3 seconds remaining in the game was big, as it gave the Pacers an 89-87 lead. After 2 free throws from Jordan and 2 for Best, the Pacers held their 2-point lead, which was 91-89, with 8.5 seconds left. The entire arena knew the ball would wind up in Jordan's hands, and it did. Jordan attacked his defender, Derek McKee, looking to score or get fouled. Instead, Jordan fell to the floor after it looked like McKee shoved him, yet there was no foul call. The Pacers would get fouled and score one more free throw, winning the game 92-89. The series was now tied at 3-3 and, for the first time in Jordan's Bulls championship run, they'd head to a Game 7 as late as the Eastern Conference Finals. In Michael Jordan's historic career, he only saw 3 Game 7s. The first one came in the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals, where Jordan's Bulls took on their 1980s and early 90s rivals, the bad boy Detroit Pistons. The Pistons held home court advantage and it served them well in Game 7. Like the Bulls series in 1998 against the Pacers, the home team won every game in the first 6 games of the series. This trend would remain the same as the Pistons destroyed the Bulls in Game 7 by a score of 93-74. Jordan had a solid game, finishing with 31 points, 8 rebounds, and 9 assists. Jordan just didn't get any help from his teammates. Scottie Pippen had his infamous migraine game, scoring just 2 points on an abysmal 1-10 shooting. Bulls forward Horace Grant wasn't much better, scoring 10 points on 3-17 shooting. Even the reliable sharpshooter, Craig Hodges, struggled to find his rhythm, shooting just 3-13 overall and 2-12 from 3. Things, of course, would get better for Chicago as they would sweep Detroit the following season en route to their first championship. The second Game 7 Jordan played in occurred in the 1992 playoffs, in the Eastern Conference semifinals against the New York Knicks. Before the Indiana Pacers became the Bulls' rivals, and after the Pistons fell off the map, the New York Knicks stepped comfortably into that role. Like the Pistons, the Knicks played tough, hard-hitting basketball, and they wanted to prove that New York would be the next dominant franchise in the league. So, after the Knicks pushed the Bulls to a Game 7, fans in Chicago became slightly nervous, but Jordan would quickly allow them to breathe a sigh of relief. Jordan scored 42 points on 15-29 shooting, leading the Bulls to a 110-81 victory. Even though Jordan and the Bulls comfortably won their only Game 7 matchup after they became champions in 1992, something felt different about the Bulls playing the Pacers in a Game 7 in 1998. It could have been because the Bulls were a much older team than they were in 1992, and with all the questions floating around about if this would be the Jordan-led Bulls' last run together, Bulls fans prayed their team would have one last chance to play in the NBA Finals. Because of this, all eyes were on the Chicago Bulls as they were the defending champions, and they had the home court advantage. There was no pressure on the Pacers, and they knew it. The Pacers as a team started the game shooting 8-8 from the field while holding a 20-8 lead. This wouldn't hold. The Bulls would storm back into the game after Dennis Rodman subbed into the game. The game would stay close throughout the remainder of the first half, as the Bulls held on to a 48-45 lead. Both stars, Jordan and Miller, had 15 at the break, setting up for a fantastic second half. The Bulls would get an unexpected boost in the third quarter from Tony Kukoc. As fans, you expect Jordan or Pippen to take over, but it was Kukoc who set the Bulls up for victory. After the offense became a little stagnant early in the third, Kukoc took over, scoring 14 on perfect shooting. Kukoc shot 5-5 from the field and 3-3 from 3. The Bulls won the third quarter, but only by 1. The Bulls scored 21 and the Pacers 20. If it wasn't for Kukoc, the Bulls may have lost the series. The fourth quarter saw how important experience is, as the Bulls made all the correct plays, and the Pacers did not. Miller came up short, going scoreless while attempting one shot in the fourth. Jordan only shot 2-7 in the fourth, but his 9 points in the quarter helped give the Bulls the 88-83 victory. The Bulls won the game thanks to Jordan's 28 points, but more importantly, they gelled as a team, playing incredible defense. The Pacers were led by Miller's 22, but the pressure or lack of experience hurt them down the stretch. The Bulls would move on to beat the Utah Jazz in the classic Game 6 Jordan winner. This ended the storybook Chicago career of Michael Jordan, but it should be known that the Pacers pushed the Bulls to the limit. Jordan would retire after the season but return 3 years later as a member of the Washington Wizards. Jordan wouldn't have much success as a member of the Wizards, but his return gave fans a few more matchups with Miller, including a duel in their final meeting. Jordan's last game against Miller occurred on February 25, 2003, in Indiana. Miller, who only averaged 12.6 points per game during the 2002-03 season, wanted to give Jordan a farewell present by turning back the clock and giving him one final duel, and a duel it was. Jordan and Miller went at each other, both scoring 25 points in the game. Miller's shot was on in this game, as he shot 8-15 from the field and 4-7 from 3. Jordan's shot was off, as he shot 11-25 from the field. Despite Jordan's shot being a little off, the Wizards walked away with the 83-78 victory, officially ending the rivalry these two stars saw born back in the 1980s. After Miller's Pacers lost to Jordan's Bulls in the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals, Miller and his team bounced back, making the Eastern Conference Finals 3 out of the next 6 seasons, including reaching the franchise's only NBA Finals in the 1999-2000 season. Miller would unfortunately run into Jordan's heir apparent in Kobe Bryant and the dominant Shaquille O'Neal, losing the finals in 6 games. Reggie Miller ended his career without a championship. He's just one of many NBA legends who crossed paths with Michael Jordan and were denied the NBA's ultimate prize. Still, the Jordan-Miller rivalry was an exciting period of NBA basketball while ultimately proving why Michael Jordan is considered the greatest player of all time. Once MJ got on top, he didn't allow anyone to find success, no matter how great they may have been.